work in San Francisco. I spent a lot of years as a data engineer. I figured out that data governance was a thing when banks started hiring chief data officers. So we're thinking about how we can apply AI to all the challenges that we're all currently dealing with. So I'm going to talk about is data teams, or let me step back and say that for a lot of people that are on a data team, they're asking a lot of questions. And so in San Francisco, the question is, when do I get fired and replaced by AI? That's probably not something that data teams are worrying about, but some people are asking that question. When do software engineers get replaced? When do data engineers get replaced? Is it possible? And that's a good conversation to have. So what I wanted to share is what I've learned, because since ChatGPT launched, I've done a few AI projects, and I want to share those thoughts and share how to think about them. I mean, this is a little bit about where you can find it. Yeah. So this is me. Nothing. Well, no. This is me using Gemini and ChatGPT. Who could create a caricature of a thinker? Rodin's famous The Thinker. And what I get paid to do these days is I do a bit of data strategy. I do some generally not data governance, but a lot of data architecture and implementing data projects. And so I was thinking, after I had the same experience most of you probably had with ChatGPT, you put in a question, you realize, oh my God, it knows what I know as well. And maybe even describes it more concisely. And the example is I was working for Snowflake, cloud data platform company. And I realized I had spent months trying to help a customer connect Power BI to Snowflake. And there's all kinds of different options if you're using privately. So it's a technical sort of challenging problem. Snowflake at the time, internally, I was an internal employee, didn't have any great internal docs about how to think about it, how to tell the story. So I figured it out, felt pretty satisfied that I could explain if you're public or private link, Power BI, basic, all the technical stuff. I was very deep in that. And when I finally got, after a few months, a simple explanation of how to think about it, I felt like, oh my God, I've figured it out. But when I asked the question of ChatGPT, I got almost a better answer than what I had given to the customer. And what I realized, what I didn't realize at the time, is that better the question, the better the answer. And so when I see prompting guidance, I hate them. I think they should all be destroyed, because if you think that the way you work with AI is to ask a question to get an answer, that's not how you work with anything that's intelligent. Okay? We have a discussion. And so so here's what I look. So I don't want to take too much time mulling over all of this. So the first thing, I thought I was working for Snowflake. I left and I joined a consulting firm with some friends. They said, hey, we need a VP of strategy. Sure, I've been in consulting for 20 plus years. I can do anything. But if I join your company, we're going to have to replace a large percentage of our data engineers because of ChatGPT. And so the first experiment I ran is, can we create a data engineer that's 10 times more effective? Because that's what everybody says in the Valley, it could be 10x, because I'm using ChatGPT. So my first experiment was, and I don't publish my GitHub because it's a private library, because I just took something as silly, not as silly, as foundational as the DAMA wheel. And I thought, sure, why not just spin up a web app that shows the wheel? You can click on the things of the wheel and it would tell you what I thought are the questions you should be asking. I thought, that's great. What I learned is that, and I'm not showing, I won't show you the code repository because you can see how crappy my code was. I really didn't put the time to think about how to model software. And so if you go to ChatGPT or any of the tools, and without a way to model software, or systems, you're never going to get any great results. So that's what I learned. So then I did a next project. It was called Great Questions, because I thought, okay, the better the question, the better the answer. So what I tried to do is let's scrape the web, turn that into text, run it through an LLM foundation model or an LLM model, extract the nodes and edges, create a knowledge, because everybody's talking about knowledge graphs, and I want to visualize it and then build a stringlet application and create a user interface. And then I had a great graphic, Socrates, Plato, I don't know who those guys are. And what I realized is that what I was trying to learn is I know semantic meaning is going to be important. So how do we represent it? Well, the correct answer, in my opinion, is the knowledge graph, ontology. So I want to know how to build a knowledge graph. I want to learn how to code it in Python. I don't want to just show or build a graph. I want to visualize it so I can explain what I'm talking. And so because I shaped the problem and then worked with ChatGPT to design the system, I made something that was interesting. But a year later, I've looked at that code and I can probably replace all of that with vibe coding. So I went to a vibe coding seminar about 2 weeks ago. There's a product called Replit. There's other ones. But if you can specify what you want Replit to do, it'll generate all the code and spin up a website. And what I was going to try to do is take this code and throw it into Replit or use the design spec for that code and see what Replit would do. I was going to do it on the cab ride out, but I ran out of time and I started getting sick and trying to look at my screen on the cab ride out. But that's what you can do now. And so what did I learn? Thinking about thinking is that, did I really learn anything? And let's go back to that storytelling example. Unless there's a dopamine release you print on your memory, what you learned, unless you're experiencing it, unless you're working with the code, you don't learn anything because you don't remember it. And so there's a lot of studies, and there's a lot of very good articles that come out of the last few weeks about the fact that people are actually getting dumber because they're taking critical thinking out of their interaction with AI. So I think the biggest problem with AI is how it's going to change our brains to exploit it. And there's a very good talk, I'll provide a link to it, that I just saw, that it's really going to fundamentally change how university students and students of all types are going to learn. I think that's a very important risk. Well, yeah, if your brain could just click a button or use a prompt, then you don't think. If you don't think, you don't establish new connections, right? So that was the one thing. Sure, I learned, but maybe I didn't learn that much. The second thing I learned is that for me, who was a structured data guy forever, I can treat content, unstructured data, website. Suddenly, I can do anything I want with unstructured data and structured data and combine them with AI tool. And that doesn't mean it's easy or that you can start to build solutions that you couldn't build before. But if you're in a data team and you suddenly have a bunch of PDF documents, this is probably the most common use case, is to ingest all those PDF documents or web pages and create a repository that you can ask questions of. That's what everybody's doing. I did a project for a retailer, and what we did is we took all the content from the data team's Airflow logs, all of their data pipelines. We took all the logs, we put it and created an embedding database, and we took the run books, we ingest that, we took the commit history when they were committing their code. We put it all into different databases, and we're able to show that you can actually, if you're a data team member and you've got junior members that want to quickly solve problems, probably the most obvious use case for AI today is customer support or supporting your own team. So if you're a data team member and you're not using a RAG solution to improve your day, then you're missing an opportunity to figure out how AI is going to work for you. And the answer to, what can you learn? Every CEO knows the correct answer is we don't know. You have to figure it out. You have to allow your employees to figure it out as they go. I'm ignoring everything I've learned about data governance and, public-private data. But if you have to, at some point, move on and figure out what you can do. And so, can you do coding with AI? The general answer is no. You can't do good coding with AI. There will always be a place for highly skilled craftspeople to model complex systems and build software. But a lot of our software doesn't need to be that sophisticated. And so, as Google has pointed out, 25% of their code and now 30% of the code that Google engineers are generating, or the best engineers generally, is AI generated. So you can use it for coding, but you need to be very selective. Anyway, that's what I walked away with. So when we asked the question, I'm a data team member, and again, I'm very technical, more on the data engineering side than the data management side. And this is from Joe Reese. You might recognize it from his book. Where will AI benefit you the most? And so this is an open question. What are people's opinion of what they have tried or seen where AI has benefited something around the data teams? I'll share my experience, but I was just wondering who has tried something with AI to help their data team on the data management or engineering side.
This is a little bit of what we did in healthcare to help us provide our information. And we went through the same kind of process with this, but we got more into set theory around rule response, create guardrails so that we didn't get surgery on a turnip, or found a skill that was particular to a certain taxonomy, right? So when we look at ingestion, transform, and serving and storage, we grab all that. But what we need to look is more about the rule response models that would come through this process.
So you're using the way we used to talk about data science and AI to talk about how we can use AI. I'm saying think about it completely differently. That's too sophisticated. The answer is supporting this crazy infrastructure. If you have people on your team that don't know how to do whatever the hell this slide is saying, data engineering, then you can ask it, explain to me what this box means. Explain to me how to do this. Explain to me how to do this. What's the difference between this and this? And I think the learning about what is good practices in data management, data engineering is probably the best use of AI in this space. It's not coding. It's not replacing data engineers with AI. That is not what's happening right now. And if vendors are selling that to you, it's been my experience that that's the 95% of the projects that don't code. So here's another one, data modeling. And this, I borrowed it from one a practitioner. I didn't put the link to her slide, but it's just talking about a way of thinking about modeling, and everybody has their own. And I'm not a data modeling expert, nor do I ever want to. But I realized that just like software modeling, data modeling is a first-class problem that has to be solved. So I looked at some AI tools that help you build these different data models at the business layer and then take it down to subsequent layers. And I think what I have found, my experience is where AI will benefit you in spaces, teaching you what you don't know. That's about it. If you don't know, so I was doing a data strategy for a company that I had no understanding of their industry. I could ask, what does a company in this industry do? What are the most important functions? Where does data management play a biggest role? Creating that sort of first level or first and second level data model. That's where I've seen data, AI impact data modeling. Nowhere else. And trying to be provocative, saying that it's useless because I don't think we have the tooling yet. And I don't think the vendors have it yet in this respect. Okay, and so this is probably where I've had the most value out of AI. What am I showing you here? I'm showing it's listening. This is a contact center agent. You know what AI is great at? It's what I did, here on the remote. Right? I just brought up ChatGPT and I said, how do you do this? Now, what I use AI for is to listen, like people are listening to this meeting, transcribing it, and then summarizing it, and then asking questions. I'm a consultant, so I do 30 interviews. How am I going to take 30 interviews without a bunch of little management consultants analyzing those notes? ChatGPT. So I give you data strategy, and I can listen, 10x more people, and hear them because I iterate, I Q&A with that data, so that's where I've seen the most magical impact. Because if you can listen to your business users, record those interactions, and capture it and say, here's the top 5 challenges I heard you say, suddenly you get buy-in for whatever crazy data management, data strategy you want, because you can listen. And I think that's probably where I've seen the most value.
And don't tell them you're recording it. Just have a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting with the recording on. That you're
Well, that's illegal in California. So like this meeting today, I can't wait to get the transcript of what Eric said. Oh my God, we're all going to benefit from that. So that's how I think about it. And I think if you ask people, I record every meeting now. It's the big deal. And so where does this all lead? Thinking is thinking all the way down. These are the questions we're asking, and engineers are asking themselves. Do my problem solving skills get better or worse when I use AI? Is my memory and knowledge retention getting better or worse? Are my interpersonal skills getting better or worse? Team thinking models better or worse? Like ChatGPT thinking. Is it better than ChatGPT? There's a good debate on the other side. Is it good for code generation, code reviews? These are the questions you have to ask, because if you assume that it does any of these better, you're often going to be disappointed. And then probably I should change this to data modeling, but software modeling impact from AI tooling. The question is, this engineering team was asking, are people even going to want our software anymore if they can just generate the software and they don't have to pay a license? Why would they ever buy software? That's a very San Francisco question. Many people believe that because AI without critical thinking and design is going to be crap, humans not going to be replaced. It's the people that figure out how to become more effective at their jobs with AI that are going to win the race. And that's how I think data teams should be thinking about AI. Well, that's it. That's all I got to say. That was the last slide. And I would love if there were any questions.
I think that, when we look at set models and AI, that's really something that happened a long time ago at the turn of the century under Bertrand Russell. And his ideas about, and he was a philosopher, but he got with mathematicians. And he fundamentally said mathematics is dead, that we don't need mathematics because it's kind of this conceptual thing. Where that if we look at it from now where AI is going, I mean, some of the things we look at is maybe semantics and how that's all going to play together. And I'm going to go through a little bit in my presentation. Yeah. But what do you think about this fact that, if we look at, data engineering as being this kind of concise, stepwise model, that kind of falls apart a little bit when you start getting into these abilities to have a set of something working with another set of something with a cognitive, with it, not a cognitive thing, because I don't think it would get cognitive. Well, but I think it'll get to the point of being able to organize this without this.
Give us the answer. He said that we're agentic AI. And first of all, that's the only place we should be focusing, right? This idea that there's one model that you can talk to and it does everything. So, but he said, if you think about agentic AI as workflow or process, this is a process diagram or a workflow or a life cycle diagram. This is how I would decompose and attack the data engineering problem. I would not try to have a model or an agent that's good at ingestion and transformation. It's just two separate problems. When I think about how AI is going to be effective or agentic AI is going to get funded and make a difference, I think it's going to be taking everything we're experts in our process models and our workflow models and teaching the agents how to perform the task. How are we going to teach the agents?
Well, it's a deterministic model.
No.
Yeah. Well,
We're gonna-
I think that
Sorry, it's a trick question.
it
I'm
is a
sorry.
deterministic model, whether you want to look at it that way
No,
or
no,
not. You have to
Sorry,
make
but-
determinations on that.
Well, no, what the answer is, we're going to talk.
Yeah.
We're going to tell it what we know.
And it's going to make
And
it.
that is, so if prompts are the way we get answers, that in complex interaction with the model is how we're going to train the ingestion agent. And this is the experiment we're running at data teams right now. High value use case where you literally say, and forget about data engineering, but any problem that you can decompose into a workflow, you have to be able to teach the agents what you want them to do. And English will be the programming language. And engineers today are version controlling their prompts because they know that the language I use to talk to the AI is the most important thing you can get out of an interaction with an AI agent or with a large language. It is my, sorry.
I mean, it's
no.
I mean, fair enough. We create this plagiaristic model that repeats what we say and teach it, and so from a human perspective, I still believe, like Elon Musk, the mathematician Jordan, who talks about, the centralized AI model is going to be something of the past as soon as we get to the DeepSeek models of decentralized AI, so that we can get our large language models developed on what each one of us are, and then use that to help protect us against other kinds of things that are centralized. And so, I prefer Star Trek versus Star Wars, in this model, right? And so where we all have this kind of say in things, and I appreciate this because it gives us a logical look at what we're trying to do when we look at data engineering cycles. But it all kind of
What it says is that DM log, whether you love it or not,
Get better.
has a lot of knowledge
sure,
and is value
sure.
that could be used to give them a better start.
No, I totally agree with that.
And I think that the world, ChatGPT 5.0 or 5 thinking is agents.
Yeah.
It's an ensemble of models that have been specialized to try to, but ChatGPT is never, or OpenAI is never going to figure out how to answer everybody's question. We are going to have to build agents that do specialized things.
Yeah. Well, and the DeepSeek model today was really ingenious in how they got to that point.
I'm way over time. Sorry,
Yeah.
but I appreciate you guys being patient with me, listening. If you want to talk about this stuff, open trees. That's all I had.
Does anybody online have any questions for John?
What I wanted to go into was a kind of practical sense of looking at data governance today, and through a methodology that helps folks kind of come together. Now, when we think of data governance, we think of technology and how that supports the ability to report on certain things within information through analytics and whatnot. But what I tend to do today is define what data governance is from a more practical sense. Technology creates confusion within the people that are involved in data governance. And data governance in itself really requires the business to be ahead of that and owning some of the information and being a participant in that. And if we don't, you just give them technology, they're going to turn off. So what we look at is our methodology and how we're trying to apply that. But one of the things is decentralized or centralized data governance, where we get the organization together. And this is what we kind of did with Caltrans. We made a proposal to Caltrans, and it's kind of how I got here in the first place. I was doing this thing, and somebody read my paper that I was submitting into the RFQ, and And they said, man, you got to give this to DAMA. You got to go just talk to somebody at your local DAMA place. And so I reached out and said, hey, what do you think of this? And so a few architects, kind of pushed me in this direction. So here I am today. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So I want to take a look at organizational alignment around data governance and how that works. I mean, it was a great discussion around AI and stuff. I have certain strong feelings about it, and I'm going to continue. I've been involved in it since I was in engineering school a long time ago. So it's not new, 1986. But I really like the fact that it's come to the forefront, and we're having a lot of cool discussions about it. But 6 critical success factors in getting a good data governance team together. Stewardship and efficiency. Is that what's really what we're looking for? Somebody has to have a brain somewhere. AI is great, doesn't have a brain. And then enterprise data management through rationalization, capability measurements, and data architecture. So I want to run through these different things, right? So what is data governance? It's a collaboration process using technology that ensures accurate, secure, and usable data. It also builds trust for all transactions and analytics, including AI and ML processing. We've talked about that today. Without good data, AI is, kind of useless in a sense. It's just going to repeat garbage in, garbage out kind of stuff. We all know that. Brings a collection of leaders from multiple departments, partners. So you got to bring together, with other people, it's kind of where people look at ownership of what it means to them and how it kind of goes across different silos in an organization. Gives visibility into data association across these relationships. So we look at joint ventures and multifaceted type of data. How does that all come together? And then it balances control across platforms. So now I can say, oh, okay, you made a decision on a certain bit of data because you're in the contact center and you're in the sales department. And we can now work together, because salespeople are going to bastardize data. I mean, you just give up, right? They're going to do whatever they can to get the sale, right?
Yeah.
But once they get to that sale, it's got to be inquiry to order for cash. That data has to be the best, right? So you've got to have a governance team that's looking at that. And then it increases timely and accurate adjudication of critical data. When that order data comes in, hey, what's more important than invoicing, right? And getting paid, right? I mean, we all like to do things and we're all passionate about data. We're all also going to get paid for it. So, this is something that we have to look at. It's critical data. Now, I pulled this off of another, I can't remember where, but if we show the business this, what happens? I mean, they're right here. Oh, that's too complicated and expensive. That's going to cost money, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Oh, it's just documentation policies. Just put it up there. It's okay, right? Or they'll say, oh, it's IT's responsibility. They'll run that thing for me. I don't even care. Just give me my sales leads and let me get out the door, right? Or, that's going to slow us down. It kills agility. How are we going to get through all of this, doing that, right? And it's only about compliance, and we don't care because you just send a report to the government. It's fine, right? We don't, care about that. And we don't need it. Our data's fine. How many times have we heard that? And then the next day they're complaining to you about the quality of information that they're getting, right? Oh, this report's stupid. I can't work with that. So when we try to look at this from an organizational perspective, you have to think about culture, okay? And the culture of data, and we talked a little bit about that too, is that you have to build a culture within your organization of data, that people have to participate in data. So when we proposed to Caltrans, we looked at it, and this is something that was done at General Electric, Appliance, and other large organizations. But if you have a smaller organization, you just eliminate this bit right here and just have somebody in the middle of principal data steward work as a liaison between your governance board, the triage unit, and then the actual people on the ground doing data work, right? So Caltrans had 12 different districts in California. It does. And so we looked at remediation in these districts. We looked at continuous data assessment, data quality, lifecycle management, the flow of data, and security around the data. But one of the things that people kind of forget about is that cardinality of information is really important for data security. I mean, if you have a misaligned address with a name and you send a mailer out to somebody with their bank statements, the wrong person, you've, fundamentally had that happen. And frankly, somebody broke into my local post office and actually was arrested for going through mail and doing this, right? Changing the different things on bank statements. It's a felony. I got the FBI was calling me and say, hey, you know the chap? But I knew how to kind of deal with it, right? So if we look at it from a low level component of how we do this, then we can help with a triage management of that information that's required to be solved. Certain things are going to be contingent. Ownership of the data is going to cry out sometimes, and people are going to kind of butt heads about what they think customer means, or product and configuration. When all that is, everybody shakes their head on this. Right? It's like a tease. So what we do is we look at from here, we look at how we can support triaging. Now, most of these functions in a smaller organization would be kind of at the steward, the largest, the steward of all these different types of places. We have a very similar thing with Navy medicine too, but that's a whole nother thing. We have 11 different data governance groups we got to deal with there too. And so the triage and the organization was really key. It was really out of sight, you know. But then the last thing is who's going to make these decisions, right? One of the stories I heard at an Oracle conference several years back was that there was a refrigerator that was put in a restaurant in 1994, and it broke down like it 2020, right? Lifetime warranty, right? So the field engineer goes in there and takes a look at it. Goes, hey man, you know, there's a little part here that's broken, and you know, that's all we need, right? Goes back to the team and says, oh, well, the manufacturer is no longer in business anymore. We'll leave that part, and we'll have to retool the part, make the part all on itself. I can't make that decision. So they pass it up to a mid-tier team that triage that. And they said, well, what do we do? You know, lifetime warranty, do we release the whole refrigeration unit, or do we just manufacture a part and OEM that out? And so they kind of got to this place where, oh, I can't make that decision here either. So guess where they had to go? They had to go to the executives, you buy it. And eventually what the executives did was, of course, replace the refrigerator, because it would just, you know, you're just going to create more problems. You made a promise, you have a warranty, you know, that's all data, right? But this data that kind of comes into kind of different situations too. When working for Navy medicine, I gave a scenario of a hatch sensor, right? So I can have a little simple hatch sensor that sits on the second deck of a ship with the surface ship that floats away, right? But if I have that same hatch sensor on a submarine, maybe you've run that, right? I keep that submarine at import. So kind of the determination of what that data does is all through this governance thing that we need to do. And I think one of the things is looking at monetization of data too, and how that happens. You know, when you don't want to lose a submarine versus something else, like a surface ship, it can just carry on. So what do we want to have? What's the goal? One council, one voice. Everybody's got to come together. You know, we need to localize an understanding of the data and the people who use it. And we have to listen to them. You know, sometimes, you know, you're going to run into situations where the users are already mad, right? But you should accept that passion. That kind of passion means they're concerned, and you should not take it personally. You should take it to a point where you need help. And sometimes that means what? Just sit there and listen to them. Let them go. Okay. I mean, it took me 6 weeks to unmad one customer down to the point where they were working with me going, yeah, that's it. That's it. And it was the first 4 days, you know, and so we really have to sit down and really, you know, take our patience to this and really go through the process of listening with those folks. And so when we do that, guess what? Becoming one council and one vote becomes really a powerful thing within an organizational culture. I mean, so this is, you know, tactically being able to get your things done without all that conflict that arose from some stupid data that wasn't right. And some of that data may not even be critical, right? Then that's actively participate. When you're listening to them folks and that passion that they have, that's their active participation. They want to be there. They are going to talk to you, and they're going to come back with different scenarios and situations that they need to resolve, right? And so you got to attend the meetings. You got to come, right? Any request not a sense must be put in the chairperson. You know, these are the rules, you know, Robert's rules, kind of basic stuff about meeting, right? Come. If you need more decisions, set sidebars. But the data council members collectively are responsible for all decisions. So we really need to come together as a council, you know, and then they're responsible to all. data owners are responsible within their domain. So how do we organize information? We do it through semantics, right? I talk to you, you say customer, you say product, you say support, you say warranty, you say whatever, right? We have a lot of different dimensions of data that we work with, right? And so when we look at that, we need to be able to be responsible for all those different pieces, right? And have people own it, make decisions. If somebody makes a decision on a piece of data that you don't like because you own another piece of data, or it's part of a shared kind of collaboration, work it out. If not, create a redundancy. But let's kind of listen to each other and listen to each other more. And this is the way I worked in the past. So what do we look at? The reality is method builds culture. Okay? Because we know that culture eats strategy for lunch. Okay? So you may think you've got the best strategy ever, but your culture will eat you alive. So how do you create culture? We have in our methodology 6 critical success factors that we define and 4 frameworks to help develop this culture. The first one of the frameworks is a rationalization model. Let's help people think about the data through pictures. Not that picture that I showed you before, but an IT system, but pictures of what they're doing. Sometimes business architecture is something we never see. Right? We talk about it, but we never really develop or see it, right? So we look at business drivers, architectures, program office, and data remediation through rationalization, right? The next is, am I capable? Do I have the maturity to be able to support this information that we're going to use now that we're going to come together and rationalize and think about it? What is the policy development on that? Okay. And then how do I sustain this model? And then we'll right back into it. We keep cycling through this, right? We do this by setting critical success factors and the junctions of those success factors within this model, right? So I'm going to show you a little bit later about how we take these 6 things and join them into these particular frameworks. So in the meantime, what you're doing really is teaching. You're helping people. Back at LA Care, there was a really troubled user. And I just sat there and listened for like that 6 weeks period. And after about 2 years of working with this person, she goes, you know what, Matt? You taught us so much that we didn't know. And because you did that, it became easier. It's not simple, but it was easier to understand, right? And so I was really, really happy about that. So all of this is a governance fabric that we put together to create a culture. And so let's look at the 6 different critical success factors. Data as an asset. The program, data comes to program represents a hopeful shift in your mind. We know that table or that chair costs, that podium costs money, these lights cost money. Tell me how much a piece of data is. It's an abstraction, you have to be able to apply it to a purpose, like a submarine or like a surface ship. One thing can go, the other can't. Why? Because the value of that piece of data, no matter where the source is, sensor, or if it's some capture on a screen, is important. Okay. And if we're going to apply it to certain places, then we need to know what the impact is on that data. So let's try and create data assets, and I'll get to that in a moment. Organizational orchestration. We must align with data management principles across multiple dimensions, because data has dimensions. We all know this, right? You have slivers of data here and here and here and here. And so how does that align, right? And create the strategic partnerships by aligning with those leaders and get the strategic ongoing fashion of managing data and business policies that align with groups, departments, and enterprise. So when we look at, talk about data classification earlier, right? We have a policy methodology that looks at the group, or that's at the group, the department, the enterprise, core definition, information, logical data, transacted information, physical data, and the unique data that's used by people to be able to do their job, like bastardizing data in the sales teams. So we look at classification from these just 3 distinct things. We are able to kind of, help the users. When they walk up to the screen and they don't see any data in the screen, that's logical data. But when they type that in, that's when your metadata and your reference data kick in, and now we have a record. Now we're reporting, and now we're looking at quality. Multifaceted lineage. So now we're federated too, right? we have a bunch of downstream, upstream effects that occur when we don't, look at this from a federated environment. So we lose that multifaceted lineage, and data lineage is really important. There was a book called Linked. Can you read that one? You got to check that out. It's kind of a semantic model. It shows that information is linked. It's not technical, but information is linked to everybody, and we're all linked together, throughout whatever it is, 6 degrees of kind of bacon, I guess you could say. And then this one came up earlier, think locally, but act globally, right? So I'm working my job. I touch that piece of data. Who's that going to impact, right? And so that in turn can, have a monetary effect on information. And then the business drivers, the military was driven by Title 10, which just says that preparation, you have to be ready for any event in the world. And that's a congressional thing. So that was our driver when I worked at Navy Medicine. When I worked with Caltrans, it was trying to get a data governance board together to help with interoperability on the data. So that's what we were attempting. So this is our rationalization model. So what are we looking at? Let's set the strategic needs. Look at a platform's capabilities, and it's a way to manage it. Operational views. Operational views are the first discussion point when we talk about data. Okay, so we create an operational view. If you're in the federal environment, DOD, they won't even talk to you unless you have an operational view. They said, if you want to talk to another department, like the Navy wants to talk to the Army, where's your operational view? Oh, when you get that, set a schedule, right? Then the last one is functional capabilities, which are called functional views, which is kind of your systems connected to those business units. We had echelons in the military, so we had the systems mapped to the echelons as a functional view, right? So I'll get to some of that too. Now, what does the governance team do? Well, they're program managers, right? They make the authoritative decisions. This is the governance strategy. This is the governance people, the people responsible for it. Solutions design and architecture, they set that pace. Roles and responsibilities, operational delivery and sharing, standards, measures, and policy. And so standards are really important too. When we talk about data and what does data quality mean if you don't have a standard to build on, right? When we create products, like manufactured products, we create complete syntax and languages around them that are not English. You need to be able to kind of pull that together under certain standards and say, hey, this means this for that. Now, here's the folks that are on the ground. They're doing what these people tell them. They're given that direction, and they have application views that they're looking at it through an application. Then they're localizing their data management. Hey, man, if I just did this to the data, it will work, and the application will run. I think it was in Australia when I first went down there, and I think it might be friends on call for that. And I walked into a Telstra store, and I wanted to buy a phone, right? And so they had Siebel running up there, long time. And so he's typing things, and oh, I couldn't get it provisioned, And so one guy came over and said, I'll do that for you. He comes in, and he kind of goes through these other screens, gets like 5 different accounts with my name in it, and says, there you go, boom. So he was able to, by localizing his management, because the screens just won't work like it's supposed to. And so this is, people on the ground will circumvent their way of developing the data based on their need to get their job done. That's kind of a fundamental thing, isn't it? So that was kind of funny. And then, of course, they're remediating the data. They're going to clean it, fix it, and put it right back in play. And this is your kind of localize your data steward, right? As this is your governor, and this is your steward, right? And so the remediation, they know what's going on. They're sitting day to day with people going, I'll fix that, Get the guy over there to fix my Siebel, And then escalation and resolution. At some point, this breaks, So I went into the Telstra office and I looked at my record. And I had 5 different provisions. We can clean that up, That's not associated data, which maybe isn't a good thing. So if we go through this process in the background, right, and just help folks think and rationalize through these different types of structures, and guess what? I mean, we get alignment with the business user, right? So here's what I did at Caltrans. This is the architecture that I put together, and this is what made people tell me, but this is not much. So I looked at it from an overall enterprise, right? What they were trying to do. So what were the things we did? Structured and unstructured data management. So unstructured data, how do we manage unstructured data? I think through semantics. We can look at like documents and websites and all that things and say contracts. and then use that unstructured data to align, multiple. Well, what if this contract has this term or this term is that? We can go through that semantic. And then once we get the semantics right, look at the metadata management when that semantic is applied to something, right? I mean, so now if I like maps, how unstructured are maps as a data management piece? It's very difficult to look at. So what we do is we kind of look at it semantic from those ingestion of data, raw data ingestion. And we just kind of say, hey, well, let's look for keywords and we'll divide that out and curate the information into these maps. That in turn gets us to a metadata and a reference data model, right? Where we can look at key value pairs, lineage, policy, based on these semantics. These are the business things that they were using, right? I mean, this is what Caltrans had. They had different pavement. They had pavement kind of documents. And the different types of pavement mean something to them, right? And so when you're driving down the road and you see the freeway's blocked off and nobody's on it, it looks like it's perfectly fine. Well, it's not. You have to wait till that pavement curates. And then once it cures and gets to that point to sustain the load, then you can drive on. So that's just, once they pave the road, it's not just there overnight, but they have a complex whole system around pavement, asphalt, concrete, mixtures, hybrid, whatever. So we were able to help that. We went through a raw data ingestion, runtime services, and we had ETL batch coming into the whole thing, right? So what we did, we went around and said, well, let's develop a quality engine. Let's do our data quality here. I mean, we can use some AI on this to kind of help with this, right? We do believe that's a good use of it. And also workflow management, more AI work here, right? To get some grunt work done. And they had all these different things. And then finally, we got to the point of structured data and the data governance team right here. This is the rationalization that I worked with in getting the business to say yes. That's what we're doing. That's what we have. And then we looked at each one of these things. It's important. The details are very important. Structured programming. They really wanted to get to geosynchronous abilities to see from point to point where certain types of things would occur when they're, you can imagine how complex Caltrans is, right? Multiple different districts, different road types, air conditions. They had air, sea, ground. All of that was controlled by Caltrans through these different districts. So it was important to get the RCRS data, which is we all know this as a product that manages that, right? They had lineage applications that would do road calculations and then linear calculations on data. So very complex, a lot of different rules. I don't want to go through all of them, but it was something. Putting this together helped us with getting from the semantic to the structure, right? And so this is when the physical architecture, we did it in Databricks. Okay, we proposed Databricks, we partnered with people. So we took those semantics and those systems, and we put them into these semantics through the bronze ingestion layer of Databricks, right? And then we used silver processing in the Unity catalog in Databricks. Very powerful thing, by the way. I don't know. You worked at Snowflake, you probably know what, don't maybe know what data.
All the vendors.
All the vendors do.
Have all
All of it, bronze, silver, gold, right? You can go to MarkLogic and see their stuff. It's the same thing. This is the curation section of it, right? But what we wanted to do is be able to go from the semantics to the type of things that were workflow to the profile standard, lens, match, link, merge, and then have that go into containers through these different type of process servers into the structured data. So we were taking semantics, we're going through all these systems, and we grinding the grinder to get the sausage over here. So kind of a quick way of talking about it. What we did is we created the cloud storage containers, and so they were portable after that, right? So this is everybody came back to me and that is cool. You need to show this to Doc. I said, okay, no, right? But so yeah. So let me continue. I got a little bit more. So when I talk about semantics, this is an example of one, right? And this is all public domain. You can see this. But the Navy, BUMED is the Navy medicine component of our military, right? And what they have are these different platforms. Platforms go from a ship all the way down to a few guys that go in the field and pick somebody off the ground and service it. Right? They have these really amazing. Anybody has seen On Call in Hell? Have you ever read that book? It's about a Navy medicine surgeon, and they have these dump trucks that they take the bottom of the dump truck, put it on the top, and they turn them into surgical ambulances, combat area. And so they'll have a set of Marines that'll drive through. It's in this book. They'll drive up, and in Fallujah, Battle of Fallujah, they were driving through, just a hail of fire to pick guys up through the back of the dump truck, scoop them in, and there'd be a Navy surgeon in there doing surgery right at the point of care, which, the survival rate went up quite a bit, right? And so, these guys are brave people, man. I mean, and so, you've got this guy, this Marine driving this truck, and he's going, hey, man, we got to get out of here. Can you pick that guy up? Because they're shooting rocket-propelled grenades and all kinds of stuff, right? So what they needed to do is find a physician that would be best suited for these types of platforms, okay? And so we needed 2 surgeons, we needed 2 corpsmen, we needed 2 nurses, and I think 2 security people. I can't remember what it all was. And so the military already has something called knowledge, skills, and ability. And they test everybody. Everybody's tested for their abilities and skills. And so as you go through it, you get the training side of their scores, right? But then you also have a separate place for proficiency and unit training, right? So then you look at who's best at certain type of situations going into combat. Some guys would rather sit on the ship and do surgery on the ship. Some guys are really want to get out there, and I can tell you more stories. Get out there and hell, yeah. Bless these guys, man. I mean, they're out there. And so you also had fleet and Marine Corps resources. You also had core practice and clinical currency that would occur. Then you'd also have readiness currency and expeditionary skills. So, can you go into a remote place and do something? I mean, it's pretty wild stuff. So what we looked at was care delivery based on Defense Health Agency's hospitals and the facilities that were field hospitals, shipside dispensaries, and so on. And all of that would turn in from an outpatient. This is an inpatient, this is a hospital, but then an outpatient that these guys would take as history and use for their different types of care that they would do with these types of things. And then you had, the Army and Navy Command, and you had all the good stuff that you had to do on that. And anybody who's been in the military probably knows all this stuff. Right? So what did we need to do? We needed to take that criteria, readiness, and break it down so I got the right position. In this case, here's an example of a TCT position, right? The first dimension was a criteria. I created a profile, and it was a profile that the military already told us existed. This is a profile, everybody lockstep in that, SOPs, with standard operating procedures, this is the profile. And then we looked at the proficiencies. So we look at the semantic, right? You go down to this semantic, I'm looking for something. I looked at the proficiencies and noticed that these are expanding. So it's 1 level here, 2nd level there, 3rd level here. To where I finally got to the point where I can make a recommendation based on this training to have this primary care physician be part of that platform. So multidimensional data management is really important, And the human aspect of this is it can't be, it can't be measured in some sense. On how these folks work. And I spent 2 years in Falls Church. And I love those guys. Now let's get back to the critical success factors and the frameworks. Okay. So here are the 6 frameworks. Here's the 6 critical success factors and 4 frameworks. Data as an asset, driven by leadership. So they kind of go through this Venn diagram to look at rationalization, ideation. So how are we going to think about that? We're going to think about it through platform requirements and placement of the data. And we also have joint strategic initiatives and orchestration. It's land in the middle. So as I go through these ideations, I'm going to have to make determinations on what to do based on how other people are saying things, functional views federated across functions, impact, operational views and interoperable risks. That could happen, right? How do I kind of join them all together? And what's going to happen when that happens? And then the last thing is you look at reconciliation, interoperability through a multifaceted endeavor and thinking globally and acting locally through authority, quality, and impact on the data. Is it doable? Can we do this piece of data? If not, no, right? But if you do, it's just that, and I hate to be simple about it, but that's that. So the capability maturity model says, how do I measure that? We can spend another hour on the methodology, but we don't have time. How do I develop policy? I do have another policy development slide. I go through that. But the rationalization side is the one I'm mostly focused on just for this, right? But this is how they join together. And you pull this to folks and you say, hey, you know, where can we improve our information based on these types of intersections of data? Now, so the last thing I want to talk about is data as an asset. And this is kind of a workflow that I do for deep looping. Everybody's probably seen this before, right? But I liken this part to being data stewards, and I liken the part on the right from maps to being the governance side, right? This is where decisions get made on what's linked. Linked data to me is like kind of hokey, right? Because you're not sure, you know, what is it? And so you sit it in this bucket. It's like, you know, in those meetings, you say a parking lot, right? I kind of think of it as a parking lot issue. But once we get to the point of understanding the profile of the data, master data, the standards you apply on that, for example, 834 order management, and the customer comes through that. And then you can cleanse it. You can't do that until you've done these first one, right? If you don't know this and this, then you cleanse, keep looking at it standard wise. And then you go over it and you say it's cleansed, then you match it. Because if it's good quality data, you should be able to match it. And if it's good, you merge it. If it's not, it's deduped and it's a new record that you put in your system. So this is to me something AI can do for me. I have a dream that I'm going to be able to kind of profile AI and then see from an organizational enterprise view if all the elements are being used and what kind of recommendations you're going to use for profiles. The other thing too, I'll just say, data profiles change with the business. You cannot just think they're fixed things. You have to, it has to breathe. From product, customer support, everything. It's not a fixed item. So anyway, I might be getting a little bit on here. So here's the big deal, right? This trains culture. This creates a glazed club. Okay. And that's what you don't want, right? So there we go. Creating culture, less expensive. In the long term, it's less expensive because fundamentally, you're going to apply those systems in the background anyway. They're going to want more of that once you develop that culture and that training of those folks, right? And then better control over data policies, brings everybody to the table, business and IT, skills to fit both small, medium businesses and large organizations. And then compliance is automated, seamless. Now our data is fine. So that's my presentation for the day. Here's my contact information. If you guys want to get a hold of me or discuss any of this, I'm happy to help you. And anytime. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one. Right. And I was one of those folks who was so impressed when you were talking about your experiences with Caltrans and why this talk was so important. And my question to you is, it feels like there's a disconnect between how human beings, like data professionals, talk about this and the rest of the world. It just feels like there's arbitrary complexity. And so it takes to be able to this big of an elephant and decompose it, structure it, and that 4-level semantic model. And so for me, it's like, dude, I've lost people if I try to explain any of that. Now, I know you did this for us because we like that, but I just wonder, and this is where I think AI can play a role, is this human and computer interface has to change. We have to be able to talk to them. Say, why do I care that the PCP was related to KSA on the levels 3? Like, I love that you have done that. And that's been my experience, is the depth of modeling required to manage that degree of complexity. I just feel that we're getting a lot less critical thinkers.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I think we have to solve for reducing the complexity, not reducing the complexity, but explaining why that's important in plain English. And that's what you were also good at, the hatch analogy. But I just wonder if other people feel that this, that's why I got out of data governance, because it was just too arbitrarily complex.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't, I got bored trying to tell these stories, which is why I tried to put the DAMA wheel into a website. But I thought, there, you want arbitrary knowledge about data management, go to the website. Yeah, I don't know. I just wonder how you think about that, because I feel like that's where I'd like to take AI.
You know, this was kind of course, geared for data professionals like yourselves.
Yeah.
To your point, we can't act like this in front of users, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, it's, and I'm guilty, man, big time guilty. When I start talking about table relationships and party models, you know, and this is full, you know, they don't care, right?
Big simple.
They see that.
Even Eric used to party.
This, you know, we know resolving many to many problems is an issue. And so contextually, it's that. So again, I think it gets back to what we need to do, a little bit of job security here as data people, you know, that we know the underpinnings of this stuff. The only way we make it better is by not going up to them and saying, hey, you need a data scientist and a data engineer and you need that, you know, it's looking like, what did you go, what? Well, let me give you this guy. He's going to do some probabilistic magic. You know, no.
No, well, but that's why I think that the listening humans
Yeah.
and using that feature of AI
Yeah.
to tell our story better,
Yeah.
more simply.
It
Part of
is.
that magic.
I agree with you too. And so there was TK mentioned that she was at Costco for a while. I was at Costco for 4 years, TK. I just want to shout out to Costco people. He did a customer master for them, and they eventually went away and went into SDP. But you know, the data was really cool. So howdy. Just wanted to say I enjoyed Issaquah and the Great Lakes, the Amish up there, right where IT is. So on. So
Yay. Those are words that I remember. I now live in Portland and I'm fully remote.
that was cool. That was only a 15-hour drive. We had people drive it off. But no, I enjoyed my time there. Is there any other questions or concerns or anything you guys, you know, feel? I mean, this all makes sense to you, I think, in some ways. It's just a matter of how we apply it, you know, and I'm happy to help. You know, you've got my contact information and you can just go ahead and let me know. But the people portion of this is so important. It's just, you know, it's just, we will not survive without it. AI itself is not surviving without it, frankly. And so I think that's what's key. So anyway, there's no other questions. Thank you guys.
So while we're getting
So-
set up, oh yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
So, up next is Peter, but before we do that, I just wanted to get a sense, since I know that those of you that have needed to take a break, you've taken your break. Do we need a 5-minute break? The closer that we keep going, the sooner we'll get to happy hours. I just wanted to, any, appreciate a 5-minute.
These are dedicated
Yeah.
people, man.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's
Let's go.
You?
I was just going to make a plug. We have data management office hours where we have a monthly session where you can bring your point of view and your strong opinions or light opinions. And sometimes Rick and I, that's one of the.
I'm Mr. Echo.
So anyway, if you haven't attended, you might want to, because we get to ask us anything and we as a group talk about it and share opinions. And it's very good. There's a microphone in the ceiling.
I think I'll see Peter.
I know. How did he got rid of me, which is good. I don't know why I was.
Well, he just turned his camera on.
Oh, that's right.
But I didn't do that. I should have. But what we should have is the camera in the bedroom. You know, shows a podium. So there's the camera right here. There. Oh yeah.
Can they hear me on the net?
I cannot.
Yes, you are on.
Well, first of all, great so far. Thanks to the best job in the world for me, because I get to go to all these conferences and learn from all of these things, and that's what I get to do. So I can't imagine a better thing for them. I'm going to talk a little bit today about monetizing this, but remind me at the end before we get to the drinks that we also want to talk a little bit about data. But first of all, does everybody know everybody else in the room? Of course not. Okay. But one of the reasons you're here is to meet somebody new. So in some ways, I have to do this with my grad students. I'll get into the room and I'll be fucking each other in the corner. I'm like, nope, you go meet that guy over there. You go. Right. Same thing here. It's a very localized community. It's been around for a long time. And you were doing great to have a chapter going here and getting all of this going. I'll just right in, like you said, some drinks. So we'll make sure that happens. A little bit of introduction to myself. I'm really old. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm 33 years at Virginia Commonwealth University. My home, they own all the thoughts in my head. Also, by the way, when I learned that, my intellectual property lawyer said that's an easy solution. You won't have any more original thoughts. And 2 companies with the university. I'm, I think, the only faculty member, as I certainly know, I'm the only that owns all that. I've got obviously other appointments at Institute for Defense Analyses, and I've been president of DAMA here for decades. It seems like sometimes we can go into those stories and tricks. What I do though, instead of spending all my time in the classroom, I actually go and live with companies. So I spent 4 years with Nokia as they were selling themselves to Microsoft. They were laughing. Yeah, hilarious, immensely mind-moving. The guy who did it actually wrote a book. Read the story about. I spent 5 years with Deutsche Bank re-engineering their back office trading system. Again, being in this and getting your hands dirty is the best way to learn what happens. And what I do with my classes is that I get a project from the real world and bring it into the classroom. They've decided there's a name for that. It's called experiential learning. Yes. Good stuff, right? And they all look at me like, how do you do this, right? It's like I get a real life project and I bring it into the classroom. Kind of give them 50% of the grade for that. So they can do all that sort of thing. I spent 3 years in Bentonville. You know, Bentonville is. Yeah. But so yeah, it's a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things that go on. A lot of time. What really comes out of this though is I introduced myself as a professor with cash flow. And that positive cash flow hasn't obviously all grown $1.5 billion to the university. Otherwise, it would be called the Peter University. Right? So it's not quite that good, but I do have more into the university than I take out as far as that goes. But more along the lines, what we're going to talk about tonight is, I think, very nicely complementing everybody else's talk so far, how to put a dollar value. Because while this is important, it's near and dear to our heart. We care about it deeply. The rest of the world doesn't quite get it yet. And until I can get this into the basic curriculum for high school, college, graduate school types of things, think about what we do for an MBA. You learn all of these things. You don't learn that they have problems connecting on the back end. And that's a really important piece. So firstly is, if you are close to universities or doing university feeds or grabbing interns from university, again, resource for cheap labor, right? Get on your academic advisory board. All universities, all colleges, all community colleges have a university advisory board that they need to have to show that they are listening to the customer. Having yourselves on those boards and be able to say, you need to have whatever it is you think you need to have more of curriculum. But I can tell you right now, we'll get to this in a little bit. Data science is actually failing. If you are a computer science graduate right now, you've got no chance of finding a job. Not because they aren't smart people and they work on good stuff. It's public perception of what's happening out there. And they all think ChatGPT took away all the computer science jobs. In a way, but you know, it's. So let's go through a little bit of this. I'm going to give you a little bit of motivation stuff, get through that pretty quickly. I'm going to give you a bunch of big stats in here with specific dollar amounts on them, and I can even name some names. Just fun. This will finish up with it's a good story, but it's about suicide, so it's pretty worrying, so all that sort of stuff that gets into there. But start off with the motivation portion of it and back to Maslow's. So bookends, right? You guys already heard your food and clothing and shelter needs are unmet. You're never going to be safe if you're never safe. You're going to or something bigger than yourself if you're never part of it. It's bigger than yourself. You're never going to know the difference between your abilities and somebody else's abilities on that. And they really want to get up to this top level, which is self-actualization. About 10 years ago, the head people hijacked this term and they call it now flow. Flow. You're having so much fun at work that you can't believe you get paid for this stuff, right? And so it's self-actualization. It's just, it's not old wine and new bottles. Well, once again, just like talking about here, there's a correlation between this. Everybody wants to do this stuff, and I call all of these things advanced data management practices, but they, of course, as we know, they're just the tip of the iceberg, and they are all largely technology based. If you don't have a good foundation for these types of activities in there, in this order, in general, you will not be able to do the things at the top. Very, very difficult. Now, you guys are all going to get the slides, so we're going to try and snap pictures as they go by or anything like that stuff out too. But of course, These are capabilities for our organizations. And that's much more important because they are a people-based process inherently, not something that can be automated, not something that can be AI'd. You can't ask AI, what's the important data item that's going to keep my CEO or my boss from getting fired next year? Marketing will pick that thing. They can give you lots of things to choose from. That's actually quite useful. On the other hand, everybody always says, in spite of this, can you do it faster? And I said, sure, if I do it faster, it'll take longer. If I do it faster, it'll cost more. If I do it faster, it'll deliver less. If I do it faster, it'll present greater risks to the organization. So you do have to pay attention to this and make sure that it is clean. Everybody wants to do analysis work, right? Now, you consider that if you spent half your time doing something and half the time getting ready to do something, that would be a good investment of things. Like if it took you half the amount of time that it took you to travel here by car to get ready to travel by car, you probably think twice about what you were going to invest your time, maybe be in the other end of the soon, right? So 50% doesn't sound great, does it? And you know what the real numbers are?
90-10.
It's 80-20, right?
And
Might as well be right. This is terrible if we look at this. And this is what you'd like to have. And if I'm spending 6 figures for a data scientist, data analyst up there, I'd like to get 80% work and 20% overhead. And the exact opposite is what's happening. But the problem is everybody knows this. But nobody's budgeting for it. Nobody's planning for it. And they all get confused. And this is why that 95% of Gen AI projects and things are not working. This data shows up in a bunch of different ways, but in all cases, it is filtered through some sort of an IT system or a business challenge. And these all look like a bunch of different projects until you guys get a hold of them and say, look, if one data item is causing all of these problems by connecting the dots literally around here, you can now say, hey, as data governance, we are finding the root cause of this problem. And if I fix this problem, we'll fix that one, because all organizational challenges have a data root. Further say they're all data problems, but that's a little bit far. The data has some really unique properties. It is nearly unlimited, really visible, cheap to make copies of and possible to clean up as you spill it. So we know all sorts of things like that. But data education is not really there. What happens is we are still, even 30 years later, teaching people, for the most part, one thing about data, which is how to build a brand new database. If there is a skill we do not need anymore on planet Earth, we do database. And I'm not saying that because Oracle medicine, we do it because it's free. If something costs 1 penny in my environment, I can't run it in the classrooms unless I can talk to all the students in there. So they have to come to an educational forum like this conference in order to find out this type of education. That places a great deal of importance on us, but we also have to do a little bit better as well. It's very inconsistent taught, and it's missing most of the places in business context. And what this means is every work group that you have in your organization, not the data workers I'm talking about, every work group in your organization is learning how to do data management, unguided by you guys. And that creates incredible efficiencies in our organization. Most important, that 80% of your data out there is great. Somebody comes here, it's like, hi, I'm here from Washington. I'm here to help problems, right? Everybody loves that. What? I just call it your data right. Well, it is true, but 80% of your data is redundant. Absolutely. The only argument I've ever gotten in 40 years is people come up to me after this and go, hey, we're at 85%. Cool. And probably you don't want to say this out loud, but I ask the question, could you make the statement for all of our data that's of unknown quality? Wow, you would never want that to get out, would you? It is true for many, many organizations there.
so data decay is something that's really important to understand too, right?
Sorry, say one more time.
Data decay, that 2.6 a month data decays, that by the end of the year, anybody, 26% of your data is either just stale, it hasn't been used, and you're just storing that stuff, you know.
We're not getting the wonderful Star Wars music behind here. Sorry?
John Williams tribute is this Sunday at the Holler.
Well, are you asking a question?
Maybe it just came off mute accidentally. Again, unknown, lacking standards, your highly paid data analysts are spending 80% of their time teaching data. You go, see, God, what's this new term? The data. I hear, real quick, munching data is typing somebody else's news. Apparently, you can. That's what it is. That's have an official Wikipedia. True. So again, the problem is this looks like alchemy to everybody else. We're going through and making changes to it, following the data, trying to get it. Because what we do is we hand students perfect data sets. And when they get into the real world, they find out that it's not without a lot of really hard work around that. Data science productivity is a problem. 80% of the time munching and the remainder of the time analyzing data. I want to pay for. If I can just change that from 80% to 60%, I doubled their data science productivity. You guys can do exactly the same thing. But the problem is the skill sets we're teaching these data scientists are generalized. And again, Mike and I work at universities, telling inside baseball stories here, but went away for the summer, it sits at statistics department. I'm back at the end of the summer, it now sits data science department. You know what changed? I'm not picking on my colleagues, but they really don't want to change. They're really happy teaching the same thing over and over and over. This 33 years. It might be my expiration at this point too. There's no interest in learning the business. There's no concept of learning the business here. It's just algorithms, and they get excited about the algorithms, but they're simply not effective. And focusing on just one end of the equation. So we've got to look at improving productivity all the way around. Again, we created these expensive data modules without systematizing the work, and all playing piano with big balls. Sure, that continues in second. Oh no. This guy named Wally Easton wants to learn how to play the piano. Can't hear him right now. My audio is not working, but he's pretty good. He's playing a real banner here with the If quality was his goal, he didn't get it. If that was his goal,
You got
absolutely got it. This is what our work groups are doing all around our organizations. They're finding their own ways, doing that kind of workaround. There is tremendous untapped productivity in there. And again, this leads us to something called the bad data decision spiral, which is that business decision makers are not about data, as the technical decision makers are not knowledgeable about data. And this leads to a lot of bad data decisions, as gainfully employed. Some poor treatment of data assets result, poor data quality results, and bad business outcomes. This is the hard story that Eric was saying. It's a difficult story to tell because I'm going to fix something and it's going to make something else better, and then things will get better. And that's a hard story for people. I sampled Morgan Freeman in there because he's got this great thing when there's this. Salesforce's biggest problem right now is that they sell good quality software, but it's installed as an IT project. It goes into an IT project. Somebody says it's got to be done by August 21st. It's done by August 21st. There's slippage in IT projects. Put the data into it, turn it on, and guess what happens? Yeah, they've got great software with bad data in it, and users can't tell the difference. They're not sophisticated. They go, Salesforce sucks. That's why Salesforce bought Informatica, because they can say, now we've invested $8 billion in data management. Pretty sure if any of you are Informatica customers, you're going to need to find a second supplier pretty soon. I think they're going to be all soon with everything that's going on inside the Salesforce.
The CDP.
Oh,
CDP, yeah, customer data platform. They're already segmenting that as a master data management, right? And so they're gonna put their thumb on Informatica.
So again, culture strategy for breakfast, right? It's recurring themes in here. This is a wonderful survey that our colleague Randy Bean has done. It is actually right here if you want to go get it yourself and take a look at it. But are you driving data with innovation? Are you competing on data analytics or creating a data-driven environment? These numbers have come up a little bit. I didn't get the most recent slide on this particular one, but that's not the important thing for this survey. What he does, he also asks, are your problems in data primarily quality, or are they primarily people process? And in 2018, 2020, 2019, and 23, yes, these numbers are not changing, folks. And again, this is why you are doing this. This is why you're here, because Where else in the organization is there a group dedicated to helping people with people or process problems that are data related? It's the data governance group. There are a couple of conversations that are just difficult. Again, the data engineer might say, yeah, great, we're gonna clean some data. On the other hand, you want to say decreasing the number of deliverable. Somebody's going through the attack. By the way, that's the wrong answer for your organization, but you know what would be the best. You have organized data that's stability in sales. That would be a good thing. I'm not sure what reorganizing databases, but developing taxonomy. Every CEO in the world will be speaking a common vocabulary is one of the most difficult things you can do in any organization. I can tell you that. Even DAMA, we have some trouble with that. So I started optimize a query. What? She 1 second off a task that runs 8 billion times a day. That's where the Douglas Hubbard numbers come in. Really good stuff. Reverse engineer the legacy system. Oh my God. I holy reverse engineered hundreds and hundreds of Oracle and SAP and PeopleSoft systems. They were confused, computerized, all the. Why? Because we need to understand what works about the existing system well, what doesn't work. We want to take the things that work well and bring them into the new system. And we want to make sure the stuff that doesn't work well doesn't also end up in the new system. Yeah, language, that vocabulary is critical. So talk a little bit about monetization. Again, this idea that people are pulling this together. There's a wonderful book on this, by the way, by Doug Lady, economics. You can dive into it. It's about 1/3 marketing, marketing stuff to Gardner. 1/3 really, really good stuff on the economic stuff. 1/3 of it are PhD dissertations that need to be solved that he's set up for us. That's what he's working on now. You know, we all show comics, right? I bought this one. $150 just so that you know what the price of a comic is. They were real happy to have it. A book like this, but you can see what's going on. If Shannon drove so slowly in the airport, 120 drivers each arrived 5 minutes late. We can add that up. Times 5 minutes, 600 per person, and that's divided by person hours, right? And take the laptop out of her bag at the TSA, and so it's ordering pizza. It's a piece of person hours all there. And of course, she's the person who, when you fly into Chicago or wherever it is you're flying into, you need to get quickly, even first class, trying to pull her piece out. Takes 10 minutes and everybody inside. So what happened here? She's a level person.
Yeah.
The point here is not that. The point is use these numbers that you already have to start adding these things up. So again, the books here, this is the one that was referenced earlier, how to measure anything. I've got 13 books out. I've sold more of his books than I've sold of my own books. That's okay. It's still. He also wrote the best book on risk management. If you haven't had a chance to get into that, or if it's part of the method worth review, this is the best book on big data. Data's going to solve all. That's funny how this thing goes. Point 1, measurement is a reduction in uncertainty. It's not an absolute. Get that into people's heads, get people to understand that. If I gave you a yardstick and asked you to measure the coast of the United Kingdom, you would come up with an answer. If I gave you a ruler, you would also come up with an answer. Which one would be bigger? The ruler. That's the ruler. And if I gave you an inch long ruler, what answer would it be? Therefore, it is mathematically provable that the coast of England is infinite. The size of the, there's actually a paper that you can. Great thing, right? But if you have a infinitely small piece, the coast of England becomes infinitely large by that. So it might be Shannon to formalizing stuff, which is clarity. That's important for all of us to start putting these things down. Each of you should have a website internally facing in your organization, saying what you've done. I don't care if you're a data governance organization, master data group, or anything else. You have to have something there because they're going to say that you did something great for me 2 years ago. Whatever your measuring problem is, it's been done before. So Google it. Again, use ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is that you love. You have more data than you think you need. Less data than you think. Getting more data is more economical. You probably need different data than you think. Let's take an example that he comes from straight up. Look, if we were sitting here between drinks, as we are, and I said, I'm not going to let you out of the room because We need to figure out how many piano players are in the city of Chicago without using Google or the Yellow Pages, which existed. Actually, that's already in 1930, but it's not really. So, how do we figure out the city of Chicago? We've got a crowdsource here. We're going to get an answer. It was 3 million people at that point in time. Great. Average number of people per household. I could actually average the number of people that were in your household to say that you are all residents of the city of Chicago. How many of those households have regular pianos in it? Again, we can find out from these a lot of small numbers. Large numbers. How often does a piano need tuning? We may not know the answer to any of these individually, but as a crowd, we're going to come up with this. And how many piano tuners can good? What days do they work? So the answer is tuners in Chicago is population divided by the household times the percentage of households with tunable pianos times the tunings per year divided by the tunings per year per day times the workday. Is that the right answer? Absolutely not. But are we an current site closer to it than we were a minute ago when we started this process? And more importantly, when we write it down, somebody can come back and go, hey, I did a little bit of research and that number's wrong. What did he say? Thank you. Right. That's great. That's what we want to do. And the elephant metaphor came up earlier too, right? It is not well understood because people approaching it. It's just as blind people approaching the elephant get a different perception of what the elephant. In the end, our house story. So, like I said, let's get into some necessary examples here. This is our Department of Transportation, Virginia. They are spending at least 15 minutes a week doing time and leave reporting. And so we tallied up 300 employees. We put the range there on, that's the pay rate axis, and the number of them is the y-axis that comes up on the top in there. And okay, they shouldn't be spending so much time. And the first question is, why do we have to do what's clearly senior management levels that are working on these clerical type tasks? Do I need to go ask people how much money they make? No, exactly. You could pull this stuff from all sorts of places. So we compute the labor costs in here. Again, these are the deltas that are involved in here. We'll have some numbers to say, wow, here's a district, Lynchburg, and they're spending $137 a month with $52. And all of a sudden, now, VDOT in Virginia is a $3 billion a year agency. They were kind of like, oh, we can do that too, But it was still $10 million that came into HR that they could go back and say, wow, you're doing something that we shouldn't be doing. Here's what we did for the Pentagon. We had a mobile phone policy. Must turn in your mobile phone if it's not used within 90 days. That's how the regulation was written. There were, of course, because the government, many providers of mobile phones, which provided many billings types and styles and things. So, of course, the answer was, let's create a data warehouse and take all this data from these stupid PDF files and put it in the data warehouse. We'll be able to get. See where this is going? Months and millions to develop technology. This is how you come up with $600 hammers and $500 toilet seats. I forgot which they were. By the way, I was officially Doge. I've been working on cost reduction stuff for the Defense Department for years and years. And I think Elon's people came in, they're like, "No, you're doing the wrong kind of stuff. Get out of here." So that was kind of fun with that since it's back a while. I actually was on it, which means we would have needed dozens of ETL streams just to feed the warehouse from the different phone companies that we're getting all of these pieces of here. And it didn't address the really fundamental questions that you have in an environment like this, which is that 188 days. Should I turn that phone off? Well, 90 days, right? In fact, that's what the rank says. 92 days. It should be direct to general's phone. Do I want to turn off the general officer's phone? No. So solution? Change the reg to say if you've got 3 bills that show no usage in a row, we're done. You don't need to do anything else. There's no warehouse that needs to be built. There's nothing. Total estimated dollar savings on this one, about $50 million. Amazing, amazing kinds of things. One for a. Okay. Now, imagine yourselves not as a group of data management professionals, but instead you're chemical engineers. Each of you has a PhD. You're getting 6-figure salaries. You think you know anything about Y2K? How does a chemical engineer you down, right? Some of them did. Don't get me wrong. I'm testing a very wide, broad It's not part of your education in here. So this is an international chemical company, $1 billion plus. They develop fuel additives, help everything work faster, better, cheaper. And when they had the tests, it's fun for my staff. You gotta wear lab coats to this one. Oh, cool, healthcare, right? No, good. When they do their tests, they take the stuff they're doing, they go downstairs, they put it in an engine, they turn the engine on, and they let the engines run, and these tests cost up to $250,000. You know who it is? These are the guys that made lead gasoline. Yeah, that's that part. So we made this chart for them, and they're like, "Well, you're done." We said, "Well, no, this is a diagnostic chart." They said, "Oh, we've never known what you guys did as a group of chemical engineers." We said, "We need this to put some challenges out there." And first of all, you have really smart people who are taking digital data from computer age. Anybody in this room could have solved it. They also have them moving things around on USBs, which means if USB gets lost or somebody goes on vacation, we disrupt the workflow. We're doing manual data manipulation required in order to we have a lot of signal reconciliation problems. Part of the business was in Europe for years, so we used two different methods in the US system. The tribal knowledge requirements. A good trick for you in your own organization. Ask everybody who learned Excel. All the hands will go up, right? And then ask them, when you were taught Excel, were you also taught that there's a capability in Excel that would recreate your strokes, keystrokes perfectly every time? All the hands will come right back down. Why don't we teach this? Right? Don't get me wrong, macros are just as problematic as stored procedures. You guys have had to deal with those, that's a problem as well. But still, to do things. And finally, they were using Fox Pro. Remember that? It was never made Y2K compatible. Problem we're trying to solve with their need time problem. So, well, again, when you look at that, go back in to do the results on this, but I had come back and said $25 million a year more productive. Appreciated the use on that. Here's one that's a bank, US bank, put their name on this one. Most of the time the banks don't really want to do this, but we add a new field. New field is E, which is equal to A plus B divided by C. The A comes from one of 6 systems, B comes from another one of 6 different systems, and C is data provided by a vendor. So we're adding some data into our vendor piece. Right? Well, some are missing A, others are missing B. C stuff wasn't actually there as well. What happened? Well, we went out and asked for it. We tried to create records. We did a bunch of different things on here, but it's just, we ran out of time. Always IT's excuse, right? We run out of time. Well, how many loans were you able to calculate the new field for? Anybody happy? Neither was the project owner. And again, this is developing corner there. She's fired now, but she was willing to put her name on this stuff. She went back and said, "Why? Well, we still got all this stuff, but it doesn't work. So go back and fix it. Go back and look for these things. I want that number a lot higher than 43." So they met the challenges. They went back, created the 43 or something. It's not good. They did additional fields. They managed the same project differently. Got the acceptance rate up to 88%. Again, same project, same process, different measures for success. This gave them $50 million a year. The number keeps coming up. It's kind of a nice piece. And I thought the US Bank was pretty brave for putting it on it. Which we put it in there and got a book, right? So I guess it was great. The real challenge with all of this, of course, is that we've been brought up here in an IT center. Good reasons for that. Our profession literally is only 250 years old. By the way, who is the founder of our discipline? Tough one, right? I consider it to be Lady Ada Augusta King. You know her? Yeah. Pretty programmer. Yeah, I looked her up. She is really an amazing person. She took a weaving and said, "Oh, I can figure out how those things are made. And when somebody makes this type of machine called a computing engine, I'll be able to make it do boom, right?" But here's where we are. We're strategy, IT projects, and data sort of switch that. And that's just easy on PowerPoint. But it's a cultural problem. Again, everything everybody said before comes back and has to look at this as well to say, how can we put this into a situation where it's really work and maximize data? Logistics company, Fortune 450. I tell I'm dozy, So I walk around. I'm here for something completely different. But there's this room with 100 people in it. What are they doing? Well, it turns out they're getting data off the mainframe, and the mainframe data is all wrong. So every time we send a bill to a customer, the name of the customer is wrong, the data the service was provided wrong, the cost was wrong, the outcome of the exercise was wrong. They spend a month working on each bill before they will send it out to the customers. I said, there's a better way, right? You guys would have said. And the responsible manager says, no, I just had the best quarter, the best year. I'm going to add. What nice things if I get old is you just don't care anymore. So when I got that response, I went to the CFO and asked her, and she said, well, I didn't realize that was a problem. If you can fix it in less than a month for less than $750 million, that's my loss of cash flow on $8 billion. $8 billion voter is $8 billion a year. So it's a very, very easy equation for somebody like the CFO to get, but nobody can probably. Here's one from the Defense Department. Again, a nice published one here. They had a wonderful system that had millions of NSNs maintained in the catalog, and NSN is like a stock keeper's unit, so they have Costco types of things. But the problem was the data was all stored in clear text fields as a result of several failed database reorganizations. So we had our knowledge workers in the federal government looking at column 4 on Friday. If it was an asterisk in column 4, it meant it was an Air Force part. If it was a ampersand in that part on Friday, it was a Navy part. This was the interpretation that they were doing on the fly with their stuff. And they needed to move to a new system. Somebody decided this would be the result. It's there, right? Now we all have to do is get all the data from place A to place B. We're going to do it well. Some people on it. Right? We're going to hire a bunch of people to sit down and do this stuff. What we call this text analytics nowadays. But what we're doing is converting tabular data to not tabular data to text. It tells you that they can change things around. That's what you're looking for. I was pleased because this is the first time I saved a person centric. So let's look at the numbers on this. We did this pretty straightforward. I'm going to pretend here that we were getting $10,000 a week. I can guarantee you we were not. This is actually a class project that we did at the university, because the SES for the class happened to be taking the Master of Science program. We're doing it. She's like, "Could you guys look at this?" So first couple of weeks we did a thing, but then by the fourth week we saw 50%. Should we stop? Yeah, we're making progress. In fact, we discovered also that 12% of the data out there was just rubbish. We didn't need it at all, which meant our problem space was down to now 30% of the problem. That's worth a little bit more. We did 10 days more work. And again, we got to here. So now the problem space is only 90% bar. It said if you can find one more set of Air Force parts that are in here, we would consider that worthwhile another $100,000, another 10 days work, and we solved the Air Force parts in 5 weeks. Clearly, we were reaching that point of diminishing returns. 22% of the data was just rubbish. And again, the actual problem, the match on was 70%. I don't know about y'all, but if I have a problem was this big, almost this big, like the green one every day. So I saved a person century. Let's see how I did it. Here's all the NSNs, 2 million NSNs, 5 minutes to cleanse and review. We go through here and do the total is 48 hours a week, 7.5 hours work day. All right, get all this straightened up here. Here's my person century. I'm 92.6 person years it would take to do this, which is where my $5 million comes from, right? All right, that's the old way. Here's the new way. Now I'm going to just do $150,000 down. And instead of 92 years, we have 7 years. And instead of $5 million, we have $450,000. My $5 million. By the way, I want to do a little bit of social engineering. Who could tell me what is the most important number on the spreadsheet right now?
Which time to it? Time to it.
Anybody think that's solve a data quality problem in 5 minutes? The actual number is closer to an hour when we do longevity measures on this. Well, what happens to my numbers if I even double it to 10 minutes, right? This is the kind of thing that executives, okay, we got your point, right? There's a lot of motivation for doing more with data. You want to improve your organization's data because data points to valuable things, it has intrinsic value in itself, and it has incredible combinatorial value. That's things that everybody's looking to get out of it. You also, though, have to use a plan for the way you not just your data people, not just your data scientists, but every knowledge worker that you have in your organization. Data measures images. I'll give you a quick story on this one that has to do with everybody knows Rolls-Royce. They make lots of different things. We're going to talk about their airplane. Most people don't get on an airplane and worry that their engine is going to fail. In fact, most of our jets are certified to get you all the way across the Atlantic on an engine. A little bit hairy when it does happen. I haven't had a jet on wood, hopefully not. Rolls-Royce used to sell things to the airlines, engines. They were a vendor, they were opposite. They changed their business model. They now sell hours for thrust. They're renamed for power by the hour. What's happened here is that they have literally changed the dynamic instead of being opposite. If they're not making money, the airplanes aren't making money. If the airplanes aren't making money, they're not making money. Changes their perspective. The reason they did that was because they wanted to have some conversations. The airlines just thought, you sell us good stuff and we get it, put it on our planes. What else do I need to talk to you guys about? They said we've learned things from, well, it was first NASCAR, but it was really fun learning from. All right. There's a Formula One pit stop from 1950, Indianapolis 500. A little bit of narration that goes on here. They got comes in. Notice they're changing the tires by hitting them with hammers. A little bit about it. And raising 10. They had a limitation in those days where you could have only 4 people working cars. Boom, boom, boom. He runs. He's done at the end of this 2 tires, 67 seconds. Okay, pretty good measure. That was 1950. Now we're going to show how it's done today. On plate. 4 tires in 4 seconds. Now, the point here that Rolls-Royce was trying to make was that we can help you change your engines because we know more about engines than any other company on the face of the earth. So their wing-to-wing process in place. And they now can change jet engines much faster because they can have conversations with the airlines about it, as opposed to, we want your stuff and it's great, I don't need to hear something. This seems like a really crazy business. When do you think this model was invented? You say, wow, that's pretty cool, right? In the process of doing this, they totaled up on their own $1.5 billion. This is an additional $5.5 billion here, just because they didn't have to do all this other stuff that came down from keeping the engines ready to fly. Okay. One more story here, real quick, and then we'll. I'm at the Pentagon. When people say this is going to happen, you know, say, okay, that's going to happen, right? So this was when President Obama said military suicide is terrible. We have more soldiers taking their own lives, the bad guys taking them out, and that is a real bad thing. We need to fix that. So we had what I call, again, transform you guys. You're no longer chemical engineers. You're now a council of colonels. All sorts of things, suicide risk mitigation factors, going through all things classified. That's why I can't still for you guys, right? Get the data mapping out. We ended up working off of a 30 by 30 matrix. Somebody would say, yes, sir, I'm row 16. You could go put an R in column 7. Like I said, I'm not a shy person. I went down to the Secretary of the Army. And I said, sir, would you come to one of our meetings here? And he watched. He looked at this 30 by 30 matrix. He heard what was going on in the room. He put his portfolio down on the desk very, very loudly and said, ladies and gentlemen, I know that each of you think this is your own data. From now on, we're going to call it my data. And anybody wants to tell me why they can't use my data to save my soldiers' lives? My office is right down the hall. Peter will show you where it is. He said to me, that's probably not a legal decision, but it was definitely the right thing to say. But more importantly, he gave me permission to put it in a book and tell it to lots of you guys. I've told this story to more than 100 CEOs. Single one of them made that same statement or will make. They will not say all of this data belongs to Amazon, or I don't know Amazon, so I'm not saying anything about Amazon, but they will not take this and say, hey, we're going to do this for our whole organization. There are data owners here that all belong in order to do this. Well, of course, this changed the dynamic. And so, in addition to saving money, we've hopefully done a little bit of work in terms of saving lives around. So I've gone through a couple of things here, again, just sort of looking at these things. Data's kind of a hard subject. We need your help on it. And we need you guys to think about these things in very tangible ways that make a difference to your So has this been helpful for starters? Great. So in a few minutes I have left, I want to tell you a couple of things about AIM as well. First of all, like I said, this is a community. So if you haven't met other people around, meet them. We're all here. We're all in the same place, same frustrations, right? It's a big thing. And there's all sorts of good ideas. I come to these things because I learn from each and every session. Thank you guys for presenting earlier. Thank you for putting this together and coming up with this. That's how we're going to learn. But isn't it a shame? Shouldn't there be some general education of people in society today, since we are all carrying around data sucking devices? I have a name for this. People that have these things that don't know what they're doing are called mobile data spreaders. That's what they're doing, is walking around the world spreading data. It's their data, stuff that belongs to them, that shouldn't belong to the companies that are trying to sell us advertising. By the way, what is the next step after advertising? Changing behaviors. Control. Needs. Although that's the nice part, but or the opposite direction. It's really what we wanted. DAMA until about 5 years ago, the bake sale. Right? Like, I need you to make the cupcakes. I need somebody else to bring the charcoal. Somebody bring the veggies, the salad. And somebody else bring the desserts. Right? Well, that's how the DIM box was created. Bake sale. Literally, no paid people. It was all 100% home. I now have a professional staff that's putting together the next version of the DIM box. We had a sort of kickoff for the start of the planning process. Again, too fast on it. We had over 3,000 people worldwide join that particular piece and want to get involved. And some of you still may. There's a website out there. I think it's DAMA governance or something. And you might take a look at the DAMA International website. We're taking it from the 1960s to about the 1990s.
This is my point. DAMA data management professionals have to join the future. And I think the fact that you're in the 90s when we're in 2025 is an expression of the importance of change. Because I think it's unacceptable to have a 90s website, 2025, where you're not actually educating anybody on the DAM book. And I would almost go so far as to say you should open source the DAM book and use the collective will instead of that formal governance. It's going to take 2 years to create something that we need yesterday. So I take
That's
the challenging,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? Because everything I saw about that process will all be dead before DAMBOK 3 comes. Like seriously. And so we can't wait. The examples that we need to be using need to be from the last 3 years. They can't be Rolls-Royce engines. They can't be year 2K. We have to modernize the way we talk about data management. It's my strong opinion. Way too opinionated. I apologize. But I just think that's why I joined DAMA, because I think we need to take the energy to rebuild this thing from the bottom up. And I think it has to change because there's too much going on where we can't, and the way we talk about the academic approach to data management is no longer acceptable, right? It's boring.
Not just boring, it's totally effective.
Exactly. So
That's
how do we
true.
become effective telling the story now?
Put a dollar cost on it, and people in the corner office will pay it.
Right.
That's the simple story you have to do.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're having trouble with that, you need to wrap a story around. Yeah. Together. What we have decided though is that we can't wait for a big bang release. So we're going to be releasing it in stream, pushing it out pieces here and there. I want you guys all to have an app on your pocket that is the DAMA DIMBOK, fully indexed, that you can do whatever you want with, like a tablet or whatever it is. And I'm working towards that. I've only got a year and a half left to be president on this, so hopefully my successor will carry it on in there. But I'm definitely got the level.
Well, I think the world needs an organization that is going to take a swing of it. I feel that that's what we can do in the organization. If we arm people, then data will be a roadblock between strategy and technology deployment. That's why I'm here to transform it to a modern organization that can talk about it, how we can use modern tooling and modern thinking to go after some of these.
Because we still have two of the oldest pieces of hardware sitting around next to us in the keyboard and the mouse. And once we get rid of that thing, then we're going to progress further into the next generation of data management.